Hello everyone. Thank you all for watching the video. Wishing you all good health and peace. The morning arrived cloaked in a heavy curtain of rain, the kind that fell in relentless sheets, turning the earth into a sea of mud. Tieu Nuong woke to the sound of water drumming on the thatched roof of her small house, nestled at the edge of a quiet field. The air was cold, heavy with the scent of wet soil and the faint tang of river water that swelled with the downpour. She rose from her mat, her movements slow and weary, and tied her faded green shirt around her waist, its edges frayed from years of wear. The familiar sounds of the countryside were muffled by the rain, the distant crowing of roosters, the rustle of leaves in the wind, the soft murmur of the river that ran like a silver thread through the village. She stepped outside, her bare feet sinking into the muddy earth, and surveyed the small vegetable garden that had become her lifeline. The kohlrabi and cauliflower stood tall, their leaves glistening with rain, but the downpour threatened to ruin them, a quiet reminder of the fragility of her existence. Tieu Nuong bent down, her hands deftly plucking the ripest vegetables, her fingers brushing against the cool, damp leaves. Each kohlrabi felt heavy in her hands, a small promise of survival in a world that had offered her little kindness. She filled her woven basket slowly, the weight pressing against her shoulders, but her mind was elsewhere. She thought of her mother, who had once tended this same garden, her laughter a melody that could chase away any sorrow. She remembered the days when the house had been filled with warmth, when her mother's voice had woven stories of hope and love, tales of a world where dreams could bloom like the wildflowers along the riverbank. But those days were gone, buried beneath the years and the earth where her mother now rested. Tieu Nuong was alone now, an orphaned girl carrying the weight of her past, with only the garden and the man who had recently entered her life, Mr. Chung. Mr. Chung was a steady presence, a man whose quiet kindness had lit up her days like a lantern in the dark. He was a carpenter from the next village, with hands roughened by wood and a smile that felt like a rare gift in her lonely world. They had met at the market one sunny afternoon, when he'd bought a bundle of her greens and stayed to talk, his words simple but warm. Since then he had become a constant in her life, never demanding, always there with a kind word or a shared moment. He spoke of dreams, of building a better life, of crafting things that lasted. "I'll make you a proper roof one day," he'd said once, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "One that doesn't leak when it rains." Tieu Nuong had smiled, but inside, her heart had trembled. She wanted to believe in his words, in the future he painted with his quiet promises, but the scars of her past made her cautious, her hope a fragile thing, like a flower blooming in the shadow of a storm. She hoisted the basket onto her back, the bamboo straps digging into her shoulders, and adjusted her conical hat, its brim dripping with rain. "It's pouring so hard," she murmured to herself, her voice barely audible over the downpour. "But I have to go, no matter what." The rain fell in heavy sheets, soaking through her shirt, chilling her skin, but she pressed on, her steps steady despite the mud that clung to her feet. The path to the market was a muddy ribbon, winding through the village, past houses with thatched roofs and children peering out from doorways, their laughter a faint echo of the joy she once knew. The river ran alongside the path, its waters swollen with rain, a quiet witness to her solitary journey. She thought of her mother again, of the way she'd hum while working in the garden, her voice a melody that could soothe any ache. But now there was only the rain, its steady drumbeat a mournful song, and the ache in her chest grew heavier with each step. At the market, the air was thick with the scent of wet earth and the chatter of vendors, their voices muffled by the rain that pounded on makeshift tarps. Tieu Nuong spread a mat on the ground and arranged her vegetables in neat piles, kohlrabi on one side, their pale green a stark contrast to the muddy ground, and cauliflower on the other, their white heads glistening like pearls in the dim light. "Fresh kohlrabi and cauliflower," she called, her voice soft but clear, her eyes scanning the crowd with a quiet hope. The market was quieter than usual, the rain keeping many buyers away, but a few brave souls ventured out, their conical hats dripping with water, their faces etched with the weariness of the day. A woman approached, her steps slow and deliberate, her face softened by a weary smile. "Do you have vegetables to sell?" she asked, her voice warm despite the chill of the rain. Tieu Nuong nodded, gesturing to her pile. "Kohlrabi and cauliflower, come and see," she said, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. The woman knelt beside her, her hands brushing against the leaves as she examined each vegetable with care. "They're so good," she said, lifting a cauliflower, its white head heavy in her hands. "I'll take whatever I can get. Fill this basket." Tieu Nuong nodded, her hands deftly piling the vegetables into the woman's basket, her fingers trembling slightly from the cold. She counted each piece with care, her voice soft but clear. "That's 11 heads," she said, her breath visible in the chilly air. "It's 110,000 dong." The woman handed her the money, her smile warm but fleeting, and walked away, her figure disappearing into the rain, leaving Tieu Nuong alone with her thoughts. She sat back on her heels, her hands resting in her lap, her eyes fixed on the river in the distance. The rain fell steadily, a cold curtain that blurred the world around her, and she felt the weight of her solitude like a stone in her chest. She thought of Mr. Chung, of the way his laughter had filled the silences in her life, of the warmth in his touch, the steadiness in his presence. She wondered if he was thinking of her, if he missed her the way she missed him, or if she was just a fleeting moment in his busy life. "I hope he's eating well," she whispered to herself, her voice tinged with a quiet longing, her heart a tangle of hope and fear. She thought of the days they'd spent together, of the quiet moments by the river, of the dreams he'd shared with her, dreams of a life where they could be together, where the rain wouldn't seep through the roof, where she wouldn't have to carry the weight of her past alone. Meanwhile, in a small house on the other side of the village, a man sat hunched over a table, his face etched with worry, his hands trembling as he poured himself a glass of rice wine. He was Tieu Nuong's uncle, the man who had cast her out years ago, his words sharp as thorns, his eyes cold with misunderstanding. He had thought she'd done something shameful, that her friendship with a young man, Mr. Chung, was something to be ashamed of, and he had chased her from their home, leaving her with nothing but the clothes on her back. Now he sat with his wife, their voices low and tense, their words heavy with regret and desperation. "I don't know how Nuong is living now," he said, his voice rough with guilt, his eyes fixed on the rain outside. "I haven't seen her since I chased her away." His wife glared at him, her hands clenched into fists, her voice sharp with reproach. "It's your fault," she said, her words cutting through the silence like a knife. "She was helping us make money. Without her, how can we pay the debt? You were so impulsive, and now look at us." The man sighed, his shoulders slumping, his heart heavy with the weight of his mistake. They were drowning in debt, their creditors knocking at the door, their voices a constant reminder of their failure. A woman, Ms. Tien, had come that morning, her words sharp as thorns, her eyes cold with impatience. "You owe me for years," she'd said, her voice firm, her hands on her hips. "Pay me today or I'll take this house. I'll take the motorbike. I can't sympathize anymore." The couple had pleaded for more time, their voices trembling with desperation. But Ms. Tien had been unmoved, her patience worn thin by years of broken promises. 5 minutes, she'd said, her voice cold, her eyes fixed on the motorbike parked outside. "Find a way, or I'll take what's mine." The man and his wife had sat in silence, their minds racing, their hearts heavy with fear. And then an idea had come. A cruel, desperate plan to ease their burden. "We'll find Nuong," the man had said, his voice low, his eyes dark with resolve. "We'll convince her to work for Ms. Tien, 2 years as a maid, to pay off the debt. Then we'll bring her back." His wife had nodded, her expression a mix of guilt and determination, her heart heavy with the weight of their decision. "She'll be at the market," she'd said, her voice firm. "It's the only place she can make a living. She has no one else." And so the man had set out, his steps heavy with purpose, his heart a tangle of regret and resolve. He didn't know that Tieu Nuong was already on her way home, her basket lighter now, her pockets heavier with the modest sum of 110,000 dong. He didn't know that she was about to find a moment of warmth, a fleeting respite from the storm of her life, in the arms of the man who had become her quiet harbor. Tieu Nuong walked slowly, the rain soaking through her shirt, her conical hat dripping with water. The path was muddy, the river swollen with rain, its waters a quiet witness to her solitary journey. She thought of the day ahead, of the small meal she'd prepare with the money she'd earned, of the quiet moments she'd spend by the river, its murmur a gentle lullaby to her weary heart. She thought of her mother, of the lessons she'd left behind, of the way she'd taught her to find joy in the simple act of growing and selling. "The earth always gives," her mother had said, her hands stained with dirt, her smile a beacon of hope. But now the earth felt cold, the joy distant, and Tieu Nuong felt the weight of her loneliness like a stone in her chest. As she neared her house, a familiar figure appeared at the edge of the field, his tall frame silhouetted against the gray sky, his smile a beacon of light in the darkness of her day. "Nuong," Mr. Chung called, his voice warm, his eyes bright with relief. "I've been waiting for you." Tieu Nuong felt her breath catch, her heart swelling with a quiet joy, her hands trembling as she set down her basket. "How long have you been here?" she asked softly, her voice barely audible over the rain, her eyes meeting his with a shy warmth. "A long time," he said, his smile widening, his hands reaching for hers, their coldness a stark contrast to the warmth in his gaze. "I was worried you're soaked. Are you tired?" Tieu Nuong shook her head, her cheeks flushing with a shy warmth, her heart a tangle of joy and longing. "It's normal," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "I made 110,000 dong today." Mr. Chung's eyes lit up, a quiet pride shining in their depths. "You're amazing," he said, his voice warm, his hands squeezing hers gently. "But don't work too hard. I'm afraid you'll get sick." Tieu Nuong smiled, her heart swelling with a quiet gratitude, her eyes fixed on his face, the rain a soft curtain around them. She thought of the life they might have together, of the dreams he'd spoken of the warmth he brought to her days.